Hey guys, welcome back for another video. So I'm just in the process of finishing up a deck project here on this house that I'm remodeling, and I'm at the stage of getting the stairs built, and I thought I'd do a video just to show how a couple different ways to cut these stair stringers, because this is kind of a mystery, I think, to some people. So I'm going to move inside just as quick as I can because it's pretty windy out here, but here's the kind of set these in place. I cut a couple already before I thought to make a video. So there's your basic, your basic setup of what we've got going on. Obviously the concrete hasn't been poured yet. That'll be done tomorrow, but I wanted to go ahead and get these done. So I've got two. I actually need 4 stringers. So I'll show you a couple different ways to cut these. To get started, what you need to do is determine the amount of fall that you have between your finished deck surface and wherever your steps are going to be sitting on. So just take a straight edge of some sort, tape measure, and measure down. It's so windy, my tape won't even hardly stay in place. But just measure down, and you can see that we've got 31 inches is what the fall is from our finished deck down to the sidewalk that the stringers are going to be sitting on. So I'll show you a couple different ways to get these things measured up and cut. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is figure out the actual dimensions that we're going to cut these stringers. So what I'm going to do is kind of show you some quick math. My goal here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have these treads be 10 inches because that's kind of a comfortable, kind of a universal, I'd call it probably minimum tread depth that you want to have. So I'm going to use 10-inch treads. What we need to do is figure out the actual riser height here. And like I showed you outside, we've got a total rise of 31 inches. And so I'm going to start with, we're just going to take, let me, I guess there's 2 things here. First thing you can do is, if you go online and just Google stair calculator, you're going to find some different resources that will actually do this for you, and it's actually probably a pretty handy way to do it. And if you just put in your dimensions, your rise and how long you want your treads to be, it'll actually just spit out the math for you. So that's my first recommendation, is just Google a stair calculator and let that do the math for you. The second thing that you can do, and this really isn't too difficult, is we're just going to do some kind of rough math here. I'm going to have a goal of a 7-inch rise, just as kind of a starting point. That's a nice comfortable rise. So we've got 31 inches. I'm going to divide by 7, gives us 4.4, so just under 4.5. So if we go 31 divided by 4, that gives us 7.75, so 7 3/4 if we do 4 risers. If we do 31 divided by 5, that gives us 6.2, so whatever that is, call it 6 1/4. So here's our couple of options. We can either do 5 risers or 4 risers. I'm opting to go with 4 risers at 7 3/4. If you're, probably a good idea to check with your local codes to see. I think in some places 7 3/4 is kind of the max that you want to go. But in this case, for this deck, that's what I'm going with. So what that means is our risers, and the riser is the vertical part that goes up, is going to be 7 3/4. And if you look at this one that I already cut, it's exactly what that is 7 3/4. And when I say that we're going to have 4 risers, that is actually, how do I explain this? That is the number of risers that we have that we're actually cutting, as well as the one that actually goes up to the deck. So here, let me show you real quick what I'm trying to explain. Okay, so just to give you a better explanation, so when I say that there's going to be 4 risers, we're going to have 1, 2, 3, and then 4. We're actually counting from the from the last step that we're cutting on the stringer up onto the deck. So this is what I'm saying, 4 risers. Actually 3 cut into the stringer, but 4 total, including the rise up onto the deck surface. Something else that I want to mention is, so I've been talking about our 7 3/4 rise that we've determined. When you cut these stringers, the first step is actually going to be shorter than what everything else is, and you can probably see that. So these are 7 3/4. This one is actually 6 1/2, and the reason for that is because as we build up the actual stair material, we're going to add on to this first step. And when we do that, so basically we need to take our 7 3/4 minus the thickness of whatever our stair tread material is going to be, and because when we add that stair tread, that actually makes this one 7 3/4, and then we go up from that. And that might seem a little counterintuitive, but if you just look at, I'll try to kind of lay this out here. If you look at the, you know, pretend like this is our stair tread material. So by doing that, and we add that, so of course this is 1 1/2, so that puts us to 8 inches, 8 inches, and 8 inches. And that's from the top of the treads to the top of the treads. And again, I'm saying 8 inches because I'm using thicker material here. This is 1 1/2, whereas I'm actually using 1 1/4. Regular 5/4 decking is what I'll use. So I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit confusing, but when you cut these, you just have to make sure that this first step is shallower than this measurement by the thickness of the tread material that you're going to actually use. So that's what we got going on here. All right, so the first way that I'm going to show you to cut these, and this is kind of the conventional way, or not really to cut them necessarily, but to kind of get them laid out. So I'm using a framing square, and then I'm using these little, I don't know, I call them buttons, but these are probably made by Johnson. Simple little, I don't know, they're a few bucks. I'll find a link and I'll throw a link in the description below if you want to check these things out. But so what we're going to do here, we're going to take the framing square, and you can see on, I don't know, you won't be able to see this probably on this old rusty framing square, but I've got this first one set at 7 3/4, so that's going to be our rise dimension. And then this one down here just has a thumb screw. I'm going to put that at 10 inches because 10 inches is our, that's our run, that's our tread depth basically. So now these little buttons set at 10 and 7 3/4 are going to give me a nice consistent, you know, references, so I can just go back to this. This is a 2x12, by the way. So it'll give me a consistent reference point, so I can always come back and always hit the same spot. You don't have to use these buttons. You can definitely just eyeball this and line these up and move this square along your stringer and cut them that way too. These things just make it quicker and easier, and like I said, they're, I don't know, they're probably less than $5, and they just kind of make the process a little bit simpler. So, so I'd recommend them if you're going to do this more than a couple of times. All right, so the basic process to lay this out is I'm just going to come get my square on the 2x12, and I'm just going to start, just butt your buttons up against the stringer material there, and then just draw lines like such. And now from here, I'm just going to slide it down, and I'll make contact. So there's our first cutout. You can see this is going to be the tread, this is going to be the rise. So now I'm just going to take the square back to this point here where we made contact, line that up, another line, and I'll just work my way down until I get 3 steps. Very simple process. All right, now so for this end over here, I'm just going to take a square and I'm going to line it up with where we stopped there. Make myself a excuse me, make myself a mark there. This step here is actually just the, this is the first one that's actually going to be sitting on the ground. This is the one that I said is going to be 6.5 inches rather than the full 7 3/4. So I just take a measurement here, mark, so that's 6.5 there. And then I'll just bring the square around to the back side, the bottom side, and make myself a mark. So there you can see the first step. So we've got our 10-inch run there, we've got our 6.5 there, and then everything else is 7 3/4, just like it should be. Sometimes you get going on these things and you get a lot of lines, so kind of make yourself some marks, just, you know, reference marks, so you know what needs to be cut out. Especially, excuse me, especially because sometimes something to kind of take note of is try to avoid, if possible, first of all, when you pick out your stringer material, get it as clear as you can. Sometimes you'll end up with knots. I mean, you can't avoid knots, but what you want to do is try to minimize where those knots might be falling. Like, for example, you see this big knot here. I really wouldn't want that to be down here in the meat of the stringer where it needs to be strong. You want this to be nice clean material here. So I've had before where I'll lay these out and then I'll realize that I've got a knot in a bad spot and that I need to kind of adjust where the stairs are going to fall in the stringer, and then I'll end up crossing out lines and I'll get kind of a mess. But that's why it's important. Just kind of make yourself some marks. If you end up changing something, squiggle out your line. On this one, I think we're in good shape. Okay, so we've got our 3 steps in the tread. We've got our 1, 2, and 3. So this here is, this line is actually what we'll lay back into the deck. And so I'm just going to flip the square upside down, and then you can square this line off here, so you have a good reference line where to draw that, like so. Now, in my case, the way I'm building these is going to be a little bit different. So ordinarily, if you have your stringer just leaned up against the deck, you'd draw your line there and you'd cut it. And I'll just show you an example on this first one. That's exactly what it did. That lines up, so that's where I made my cut. In this case, it's a little bit hard to explain, but I can show you after I build these. I'm actually going to extend this out 1.5 inches because the way this hangs on the deck, I'm going to actually have a, let me mark this here quick. All right, so I've changed this a little bit here. So, you know, like I said before, I'm not going to cut here. We're going to swiggle that line out. I'm actually going to cut here. And the reason I'm doing that is because this stringer is, actually going to sit on the inside of a 2x8 like that. So these, I'll kind of lay this out. You can see what I'm talking about. So the 2 center stringers are going to be fastened to the 2x4. This 2x8, this 2x8 ledger will actually get fastened to the deck. So these 2 middle stringers will be flush up to the 2x8. The ones that I'm cutting now are going to be out on the ends. Again, this is my cut line. They will actually fasten to the side of that 2x8. So that's why I'm cutting this a little bit different. Hopefully that makes sense. I'll show you when it's all put together what I'm talking about, and I think it'll make more sense then. Okay, so demonstrate the second way that you can do this, which may be the easier way to do it. If you have you need to have a piece of scrap wood, and the piece of wood, a piece of 2x, I suppose theoretically you could probably do it with like 3/4 plywood, but 2x is going to be your best friend on this, I'd say. So you need to make sure that your piece of wood is at least as wide as, you need to make sure that this is at least as wide as what your rise is going to be. So again, go back to the beginning here. We know our rise is 7 3/4 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this piece and I'm going to mark out 7 3/4 there, and then I'm going to come this way, and we know that 10 inches is what our step is, what our run is. And then I'll just take a straight edge and I'll run a mark like that. And then we can cut out this corner that we just created. And I've got a drop off from the stringer that I did before, so I won't have to cut this up. But essentially, that's what you end up with. So again, 7 3/4, 10, cut that out. This is what you'd end up with if you cut that off of that board. Then I'm just going to take a 2x4. This could be plywood or this could be whatever. And I'm just going to screw this corner that I cut out to this 2x4. All right, so now what I've done is I've just created a template that's going to match our cutout here. All right, so all I'm going to do now is I'm going to come down to our fresh side that we haven't cut yet, and I'm going to take a count. I mentioned before watching out for knots. I've got a knot here and I want to try to steer clear of. And I know if I do there, that should clear that. Now I'm just going to walk right down. And I'm just going to mark this based on this template that we attached. And there you go. So here again, we've got step 1, step 2, step 3, and then I'll do all the same things as far as, you know, squaring this off so I can cut this, and we'll be ready to actually make some cuts. As you can see, that process is actually probably quicker and easier than using the framing square method. So take your pick, whatever makes the most sense for you, but there's 2 different ways that you can lay these out. When you're finishing these off, just make sure you cut right to the corner, don't go any deeper, and then you can either use an electric jigsaw or you can just use a regular old handsaw. Cut the other one out and we'll have all 4 ready to go. Okay, so I've got those hanging on the deck now, as you can see. Just wanted to kind of show you what the final product's going to look like. I just have this tacked in place because obviously we got to get the sidewalk poured. But here's what I was explaining, why I cut these outer stringers a little bit different. So this is typically what you're going to end up with. So the stringer comes up and it's butted up flush to this ledger board that I hung on here, and I just have it secured from the back with some screws. And then when everything's final in place, I will use I use some joist hanger brackets like that to firmly attach it. And then these outer stringers, as you can see, I've actually got those attached from to the side of that ledger board rather than flush on it. And I just did that for looks, basically, because I think it'll look a little bit more finished and give me the best result that way. So there you go. That's the process for cutting those stringers. As you can see, there's a couple different ways to do it. I'm sure there's other ways too that I don't know about. I'm not a professional deck builder, but the times that I've done this, these ways work for me. So hopefully you guys found that video helpful. If you did, do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel if you're interested in seeing more home improvement projects, and we'll see you in the next video.